I haven't made it a secret that I'm a huge fan of the new Bronco. I think it's one of the best retro-inspired modern designs, that and the new Nissan Z. And in this video, what I want to do is take the 1966 pickup Bronco and modernize it to something that could be built today, since Ford is not going to do that themselves. They said they might have done it, but they decided to not do it. Let's go back in time and let's have a look at all the Bronco generations here with Rosie in the picture as well. So the 1966 was a legendary year for Ford, not only with the introduction of the original Mustang, but of course the four-wheel drive Bronco was born the same year as a wagon, pickup, and roadster style, which is super cool, and all of them were two-door style vehicles. It had a short and stubby wheelbase of 92 inches and was built on its own dedicated platform at the time. The first generation Bronco was a simple, basic, and rugged vehicle with its solid front and rear axle. The body, the super boxy body, was made out of sheet metal and would keep its shape pretty much the same over the coming 12 years. The second generation Ford Bronco came out in 1978. However, it was very short-lived, with only a couple of model years before being replaced by the third generation in 1980. It was based on Ford's F100 full-size pickup, and with that came a longer wheelbase now, stretching from 92 inches from 1966 to 104 inches for the 78 model. In general, it was just a much larger vehicle than the original, 2 feet longer, about 10 feet wider, and 5 inches taller. Power came from a 5.8 liter V8, made it to a 3-speed automatic transmission. It wasn't what you would call quick, even though it had this massive V8 under the hood, and it wasn't quick by today's standards and not by the 70s standards either. 0 to 60 still took a painful 13.7 seconds. For the 1980 model year, the Bronco shrinks back in size and becomes shorter, narrower, and lighter, with a design that was supposed to be more fuel efficient than the previous generation. Also, as a first for 1982 here, there was a proper blue Ford oval or Ford emblem now in the front, and this replaced the Ford lettering that the previous generation used to have in the front. Engine choices included a standard inline-six, a 4.9 liter V8, and 2 5.8 liter V8s. What's interesting for this generation is that there was an equivalent to the modern Bronco Sport back in the 80s as well. However, it wasn't called the Sport back then, it was called the Bronco 2, and this was 19 inches shorter, 9 inches narrower, and 5 inches lower than the full-size Bronco of the time, and only came with a diesel inline-4 or V6 engines. In 1987, the Bronco was updated again, this time with a much smoother, slippier design and bodywork. Changes included wraparound headlights and bumpers that now looked more integrated in the body and less like parts that were stuck onto the car afterwards, and it also got rounded wheel arches for the first time ever on a Bronco. By the time the 5th generation model came out in 1992, it has become clear that the full-size 2-door Bronco isn't selling as well as other 4-door utility vehicles of the time, and Ford designs for the 1992 model is barely noticeable. Some of the changes that you can see are the new grille and the more rounded front end features. So what's interesting here about the Ford Bronco is that throughout time it's been pretty much a pickup. If you wanted to, you can take off the rear cover and all of a sudden it became a pickup, and unfortunately Ford is not going to do that now with the current generation Bronco. So that's kind of what I want to design here in this video. Take the original. Here we have the 1966 Ford Bronco right here, and this graphic is an absolutely fantastic graphic that I'm going to use here from bronco6g.com, which is the forum that you want to be in if you have any interest whatsoever in Broncos. Great graphics. So what I want to go through here is the generations and the design. So here we have the original, and what's really cool here, which I'm going to wrap around when we come to the last one, is the graphics of these cars throughout the generations. Look at the graphics of the front end here of the Ford Bronco, the first generation. Very simplistic, almost like a tractor style, both in design and in function as well. If you have a look at these wheels here, they're not wide at all, super narrow, but very, very rugged and very utilitarian design and function of the first Bronco. It still looks very cool cool. You could have this in a bunch of different variants. The pickup, you could have it as a roadster, and of course, if you put the roof on, you have a hardtop as well. Moving on to the second generation right here, you can see just how much bigger this became from the original Bronco. It's insane. And the reason I think that it only lasted for 2 years here, as you can see, 77 to 79, is because the oil crisis that happened right around this time. The muscle car era just stopped abruptly right here, so I think Ford realized that they need to quickly build something that is more efficient and smaller, both in size and engine as well. And that's what they did with the third generation here in 1979. This is probably, if I had to pick one generation that's my favorite, that just screams Bronco to me, it's probably the third generation here from 79. I love this design. It looks like a proper off-roader with a massive engine in the front. Super slow, yes, but it just looks cool. I love the design. I love the side mirrors here, and this graphic line that we have inside here as well, you can see on all the Broncos up until today, actually, which I'm going to show in just a second here. So moving on to the fourth generation right here, you can see the big difference here in how they started to design cars. Up until the third generation, we have the parts, the bumpers, the lights, the grille, everything looks, you can tell that they are different pieces from the car, and you can tell that they've been applied onto a body. It doesn't look very integrated in the design. But here, when we come to the 80s, the design of cars in general changes a lot. If we look at this front view here, you can see that the wrap-around headlights, they now wrap around the corners here, so they follow the body lines, something we haven't seen up until this point right here. And the same thing with the bumpers here. They look very integrated and look part of the design instead of looking like an additional piece slapped onto the boxy shape of the Bronco. And then of course the fifth generation, not much changed here. They kind of didn't really change a lot. Some changes to the front end, a little bit smoother curvatures here, and you have a little bit more radiuses on pieces like this. The grille design becomes a little softer and so on. Nothing too crazy going on there. And then of course we have the today's generation, and what I love about the brand new 2021 Bronco here is the connection to not the fifth, not the fourth, not the third, not the second, but it goes all the way back to the first generation Bronco right here. This is almost, if I were to modernize this 1966 design here, this is what it would look like. It's such a perfect modernization in my opinion. They kept the essence of the 1966 Bronco here and just turned it into a modern, beefy looking thing that looks like it could have been designed in the 60s with graphic features and small details from today, from the modern era, such as the LEDs right here and stuff like that. But the body lines of this thing, if we have a look at this line right here, this is an important line that I think is very, very important for the Bronco, and it ties all the generations together. This line you rarely see on modern cars today. It's like a little not dent but crease that goes along the side of the body. Very common throughout the 60s all the way up until the 80s, and you don't see them today, but I'm so glad that they implemented that line into this body here. You have it right here, you have it in all the generations here, all the way back to the original Bronco right there. Details like that is what I appreciate when I look at designs like this, that they actually thought about the small details and the styling and the manufacturing methods of the 60s, and then implementing some of those features onto a brand new car. Looking at the side view here, and this is also from, of course, Bronco6g.com. Go and check out the forum if you're interested in Broncos. Have a look at the side views here. You can see that from the beginning here, we had a removable sort of hard top covering the bed all the way up until today. Yes, you can remove this, but it's not going to be a solid B-pillar right here, so it's not going to create a pickup truck of the new generation, and that's what we're going to change in this video, and hopefully create something cool based on the 1966 pickup, applying modern features onto that car in the redesign. One interesting thing that I noticed now when I look at these in side view is if you look at the greenhouse here, this, the first generation, still this is going to go back to just how good of an execution the modern, the redesigned Bronco 2021 is. But if we have a look at this part right here, if you look at the greenhouse, it's very static in the first generation, and then throughout the generations we have this angle on the B-pillar right here, which looks cool. It looks really dynamic, and it gives kind of the car a forward leaning motion. Even though it is a pickup truck or a two-door utility vehicle, it still gives a motion forward with this little angle right here, which we have on all the the generations up until today, where they decided to go back to the original 1966. So they really didn't look at other generations other than the 1966 when they designed the brand new generation of Ford Bronco, and that's what I appreciate about the new Bronco. They could have made it based on the 1996 fifth generation if they wanted to, but I think that would have become just another SUV that blends in with everything else and would not be nowhere near as cool as what we really got with the design based on the 1966 version. So here you can see some of the performance numbers and prices of the Bronco throughout the time and history, and you can see that these prices right here are the ones that are based in today's current, or I mean value of the dollar, I guess you could say. So it's kind of pretty similar. It went really expensive with the fifth generation right here, $34,000 or almost $35,000 for the base price, which is pretty expensive. But other than that, let's have a look at the rear views here of these cars. You can see that they are very similar throughout the year. Specifically, it's like these cars like here, these generations are in a class of itself, and then you have the first and the last connected the most, and these are like the main Broncos right here in the middle, and then we have the really two cool ones, 2021 and the 1966, really standing out and being like a son of the 1966. That's kind of how I see the 2021, just because of all the similarities that we have between the two cars. So now let's have a look at the 1966 Ford Bronco pickup. I love this design. It's such a happy, functional, you just want to go in and you can drive this forever and it's not going to break down. And if it breaks down, it looks like it would be the simplest thing to fix whatever is broken on this truck. That's what I love about this design. It's pure function. There's not a lot of styling going on here, but as I've said before, the less styling you have, the more of a timeless design it becomes, and that just goes to show when you look at the 2021 model. It looks pretty much the same as this in lines and in how vertical everything is, and it looks good today. It still looks modern. So that's why I think if we have this design right here and we apply the modern face here and apply the Sasquatch package onto this body right here, I think that is going to look really, really cool. But we keep the body itself, this body, we're gonna keep this 1966. So it's going to be a mix of 2021 when it comes to the graphics and the technology, I would guess, and the off-road capabilities, but the body and the greenhouse here is going to be 100% 1966. So it's going to be interesting to see how well that's going to match with the new graphics, slapping it on to a 1966 body, and let's see how that is going to turn out. So I think the result here that we have in the end result of my redesign here of the 1966 Bronco pickup, that just goes to show how well of a design the 2021 Bronco is. You can slap it onto a 1966 body and it would still look like it could be built today, or it might even be more telling of how good of a design the 1966 is, if that works with today's graphics. That's how it should be described, that the 1966 is just a timeless design. And yes, it's a little bit of a shame that they're not gonna build the Ford Bronco, but we still got the Bronco as it is today. And I think taking off the roof and the doors and everything, it's almost like you have a pickup truck. It's a pickup truck without the doors and without the B-pillar, basically. And I'm really looking forward to when next year, hopefully, now they have a 2022 Bronco, when the prices come down and I can actually buy one for myself.